there, and welcome to another Mason History Headquarters, where today we're going to be talking about the coming of independence and the growing colonial unity of the United States. In the last video, we talked about the major landmark documents that were important in the governing of the colonies. We talked about the Magna Carta, the Petition of Right, and the English Bill of Rights, and more importantly, the things behind them: limited government, the idea of representative government, and of course, an ordered government. And these ideals and traditions were really important because it really organized the system of government for the colonies. So all the colonies had a hierarchy of power that was practiced within the colonies. So of course you had the crown, that was the leader that ruled from England and, with their almighty sword and blah, blah, blah. And then you had the governor. The governor was basically the mouthpiece of the crown in each of the colonies. So that person would then, with the crown, kind of operate the federal power: foreign affairs, provide currency, trade. The council was appointed by the governor, acted as a judicial system, and was not as important as the colonial assembly. These were elected colonists and acted as a representative lawmaking body. And these colonial assemblies were important because this is how they exercise their representative power. These colonial assemblies, for generations and for 100 years of the colonies, were really where the laws were coming from, the taxes were coming from. They were self-governing. They were practicing a period of basically being ignored by the crown. And the practice of salutary neglect is the fact that they thought the colonies would flourish if they ignored them and left them to be and to self-regulate. Until basically about 1760, when we see that policy started to change with the French and Indian War and the crowning of King George III, which basically he had a very different way to see the colonies. No, not this King George III, but probably how you better recognize him. The colonists started to unify, and they started to see each other as not 13 different colonies, but as all unified American colonies with a common goal. So following the French and Indian War, the British were paying more attention to the American colonies, putting taxes in place to starting to pay for the war, and British troops were still remaining in the colonies but the colonists didn't like this. And in fact, what it did was just spur their growth of their unity against the British, against these policies together. And in fact, Benjamin Franklin even saw how the colonists were growing more unified in 1754, just before even the French and Indian War, had proposed the Albany Plan of the Union. And this plan was basically to provide a common council to make universal policies for the colonies. But even this plan fell short and was soon forgotten, as many of the early plans for unification really did. They weren't ready for things like independence. They just wanted to be more unified and have common goals. However, in 1765, new taxes that were imposed by the Crown and Parliament started to revive colonial desires for unity, and they met together in what was called the Stamp Act Congress. At the Stamp Act Congress, 9 out of the 13 colonies met together to create basically a declaration of rights and grievances to the king. So they wrote him a letter, said, hey, these are all of our protests. Hey, this is what we want you to fix. And Parliament did repeal the Stamp Act, but not without consequences. Basically, throughout the entire road to Revolutionary War, you have this chain of action versus reaction. The British do something, the Americans do something, the Americans do something, the British do something, and they just kept going on, and it just escalated. We can see that with the Boston Massacre and how they actually came face to face, and of course it was used as propaganda, and then there was just more that brought to colonial unity. So then along came Samuel Adams. Now we know Samuel Adams, right? He's pretty famous. No, not the beer. Please. No, the Samuel Adams, that was of course one of the leaders of the Sons of Liberty and very much behind the Boston Tea Party, calling all of the colonists to action to meet together and toss the tea in the harbor. Well, he organized the Committee of Correspondence. The Committee of Correspondence was basically an intricate network that was organized not just only in Boston, but through all the 13 colonies, which of course means unity, which seemed pretty interesting, right? And so it just keeps going back and forth. The British do something, the colonists do something, the colonists do something, and the British do something, and it's a never-ending cause and effect loop that they keep going on for several years. And it just keeps resulting in more colonial unity as they keep asserting that their basic rights are being ignored. So after the British finally passed one of their big ones, their big laws that basically really irritated the colonists. The intolerable acts, which were focused on pinpointing Boston and punishing them. You had your major players arise and kind of come out of the woodwork. You got your Sam Adams, your John Adams, your George Washington, your Thomas Jefferson, and so many more, who all decided to get together and discuss this growing problem. So they met in Philadelphia, and in Philadelphia kind of becomes the part where they all meet. And this becomes known as the First Continental Congress of the United States. And at the First Continental Congress, they basically started to discuss this growing problem of British aggression and what they needed to do about it. So they wanted to, of course, discuss the different options: independence, or should we write another letter? They decided to write another letter. They weren't ready for independence. That was just going to be too soon, too much, too soon. So they wrote King George another letter. And they basically said, you're not doing what we want you to do. And King George didn't care. He was like, come on, guys, I'm your king. You need to listen to us in Parliament. We have the right. You are subject to our rules. As you can just expect, the colonists started to prepare, even though they weren't ready for independence. So in 1775, there is, of course, one of the most important events in history. The Battle of Lexington and Concord in April of 1775, and this we know as the shot heard around the world, becomes the most pivotal moment that the world starts looking at us. So they met together again and they said, well, it didn't go right the first time, so what are we going to do this time? So they took on federal responsibilities this time, organized Army and Navy, borrowed money, bought supplies, made treaties, and they basically became the federal government of the states. And the most important, they commissioned and signed the Declaration of Independence.
Yes, sir.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We fought for these ideals, we shouldn't settle for less. These are wise words, enterprising men quote them. Don't act surprised, you guys, cause I wrote them. Ow!
So the colonists really did become more unified during this time, and it was, even though that the Declaration had no legal binding or authority and really had no political support, the official independence was recognized in 1783 with the signing of the Treaty of Paris, as America did eventually win the war. So to refer back to Benjamin Franklin's quote, they either hung together or hang separately. They knew that they needed to be unified in order to be a new country and to gain the independence that was necessary. And so, of course, this is what we celebrate, right? This amazing independence, and everybody is so happy. Nope. But we'll learn about that in the next video on the Articles of Confederation. Thanks again, guys, and have a great day.